Hi, and I'm here today to talk to you about holding brass instruments correctly. One of the basic things about playing is just to hold the instrument, first of all, in the right way. So I'm going to start off with a cornet. I've got a trumpet and I've got a tenor horn. We'll come to those two in a moment. Let's just talk about the cornet first of all. So I'll talk about the way we're supposed to hold it, and to begin with, we need to make sure that we grab round this middle section here. This is called the valve case. Some people hold them in slightly different ways. Some people hold them down here with a little finger underneath like this. Some choose to hold it like this. But in any event, we want to avoid holding it in such a way that we're going to impact the way we place our mouthpiece. So, for instance, holding it so that, like this, for example, will tend to pull the cornet down a little bit at the front, and we end up blowing sort of down into the mouthpiece, becoming what we call a down blow. And then again, we want to avoid, pulling our thumbs down too much here and becoming what we call an up blower. So where you put these fingers is really scrunched up in this area here, and your thumb should be against the first valve right here. It has to be comfortable. I end up putting my fingers over this tube here. If you've got smaller hands, you might be able to fit it underneath, that's fine. But it's got to be comfortable. We don't want to be squeezing too hard and pressing our thumbs into a part of the cornet which is going to cause any pain. So this is my recommended way of holding it. Now with the right hand, again, there are better ways and worse ways. So we don't want to have our thumbs sticking up here. Really, it should be placed between the first and the second valve. The little finger you can place in here, I'll talk about this in a second, but the tips of the fingers have to go on top of the valves, the next three fingers. And they have to be held in such a way that they're perpendicular, if you like, to the valves. You don't want to be in this position, and you don't want to be in this position. Similarly, you don't want to put your fingers too far over on the tips of the valves. I'll come back to that reason in a second. Now, talking about this is known as the mute hook, and the mute hook is literally for putting in a mute. So if you want to put a mute here, if you hold it with a little finger in that mute hook, you're going to achieve some stability when you play. You can still play with one hand. But if you take your finger out of here and attempt to put a mute in, oh dear, then we can't really get to the valves properly. We're in a position where we have no stability. So this is the reason for the mute hook. Now when we're holding it in a regular fashion, then you don't need to put your finger in here if you don't want to. I find that this third finger is restricted a little bit when I put my little finger in this mute hook. You just don't quite get the same movement. So just to free it up a bit, I'll often take my little finger out, maybe rest it on the top here, but I don't really need it in there when I play, and certainly many people should find the same thing. So placing the tips of the fingers on the valves is important, because when we move our fingers, we can move them the quickest at the tips. If you put your finger halfway along and try and move the valve, yes, you can do it, but the speed at which the valve moves is a little bit slower. And if we're going to play any fast music in the future, we need to get used to be able to play with the tips of the fingers on the valves. Okay, now the trumpet is exactly the same as the cornet in many respects. The shape of it is a little different. I won't go into that right now, but the way you hold it though is exactly the same. You're going to put your thumb in the same place, the fingers squashed down in the same place here. I think there's a little bit more room on a trumpet here. And similarly, you're going to put your little finger in there if you wish, but the thumb between the first and second valves, look, pushing up here. If you hold your thumb freely, like this, then your fingers seem to float on top of the valves and you don't get that stability. By putting that thumb underneath here, that opposing thumb, you've got something to push against, and it's a little bit more stable again to push the valves down. So that's important that you do that. You may see some players put the thumb along here. If that's comfortable and they like doing that, that's fine. But for me, you know, I prefer it so if I put my thumb in this position, the fingers and the tips of the fingers particularly will be in the right position. Just going on from that, you might see some trumpet players holding it like this with two fingers underneath. Some very good players do hold it like that. I prefer not to, but you know, the main point is though that whatever position you adopt, that you don't push your mouthpiece up or down, and in fact that it's in this sort of slightly downward position in the end. You know, you want to be kind of like this, not this, not this, and certainly not, you know, putting your mouthpiece to one side or the other. It should be in the middle. Right, on to tenor horns, baritones. Sorry, I don't have a trombone today. You might have to do a separate video on the trombone. But when it comes to playing this type of instrument, you'll notice that I don't hold it straight up when I play. It should be at an angle like this. Now when we play the euphonium, the baritone and the tenor horn, we shouldn't really hold it in such a position that we're trying to peep around this side of the bell. A lot of children and young people will do that because they want to hold the instrument straight up, and they just find that they can see this way a little bit better. But ultimately, you're going to have problems with placing that mouthpiece. It's going to be a little bit facing to the left, you know, and you'll end up either with the mouthpiece on the left-hand side of the lips here, in this position, like this, rather than the centre. And we need to be in the centre. So the best way to do it, and the correct way to do it, is to make sure that the bell is pointing kind of up in this direction to our right. And when you look at your music, of course, you're looking over the top of the mouthpiece and everything's lined up for playing. Similarly, you need to have your thumb under this tube here. Lots of the euphonium baritones will have a tube in this point in position. Thumb goes under here, tips of the fingers are on top of the valves. Sometimes there'll be a mute hook, but generally know that there's no need for one. So there's no little finger ring or finger hook here for the third finger. On this particular instrument, the idea is that you actually hold, again like the trumpet, round the valve case. There's even a little support for it here, which is fine for the tenor horn. For a baritone, you're going to be kind of more in this position, with your thumb usually pressing against this pipe here and your fingers curling round. On euphoniums as well, it allows your access to the fourth valve. On some euphoniums you get a fourth valve down here, and this is the position eventually that you want to be in. Also, sitting up straight is important as well. You don't want to be slouched back in your chair. You want to really be on the edge of your seat with your back quite straight. That means then you can get a lung full of air properly. If you slouch over when you play and you try and breathe in this position, watch what happens. So already a lot of that lung force, if you like, or the force of the air going in, is spent pushing my body up, and that makes life a little bit more tricky to concerning breathing in. So if you hold your body up like this and you breathe in, now you can get a lungful of air, and that lungful of air doesn't have to push your body out of the way anymore, so it's much easier to get more air in. So sitting up is quite important as well. So that finishes my little video on holding an instrument correctly. I hope that it helps, and happy practicing.